Hello, and welcome back to Civilization Education. We last left off with Glaucon, Socrates, and Adeimantus agreeing to create a city in speech in hopes that if they can find justice in the city, then they might find it in the individual. As Socrates says, quote, "In my opinion, we should make this kind of investigation of it. If someone had, for example, ordered men who don't see very sharply to read little letters from afar, then someone who had the thought that the same letters are somewhere else also, but being bigger and in a bigger place, I suppose it would look like a godsend to be able to consider the little ones after having read these ones first, if, of course, they do happen to be the same. Now, if you're going to do a thought experiment, it must be done correctly, just as a science experiment, meaning one cannot just postulate a city and ask, where is the justice? Instead, you must start at the beginning. Why do people form cities? What do these people do? What do these people need? How do they accomplish these things? As you answer one question, move on to the next, and then the next, and so on. As for this group, it is their understanding that cities are formed because of the division of labor, that each individual is not wholly sufficient in themselves and need others to meet their needs. The first four needs this group lists in descending order of importance: food, housing, clothing, shoeing. Personally, I find this interesting because these are things one person can do themselves. I agree with what will be mentioned later, that a man who devotes himself completely to a single task will be better than one whose attention is divided among several. However, I disagree these are the needs that drive people to form cities. Instead, it is defense from war. I will expand on this further when we get to the Guardians. So the first four needs are food, housing, clothing, and shoeing. Then the men reason it is better that each man focuses on the trade his talents best suit him for than every man divided working in all the trades. Since the basic needs are now met, the concern shifts to supplying the quality or surplus of the need, meaning supplemental trades are needed. It is not good for a farmer or house builder to take time building tools when they could be working. Therefore, a tool maker is now necessary. Same goes for a weaver or shoemaker. But what now of animal husbandry? Cowherds to supply oxen for the plowing of the farmer and hauling for the carpenter are now needed, as are shepherds to supply the wool and leather for the weavers and cobblers. Next, the group realizes that it is pretty nearly impossible for a city, like an individual man, to be able to completely supply all the needs of the people, and therefore is in need of imports from somewhere else. But they can't just import goods, as those who exchange them need something in return, and thus the city must produce enough for exports. Obviously, as we've already covered, the farmer, weaver, cobbler, carpenter, cowherd, and shepherd can't fulfill this trade, and so is born a merchant. But as merchants' trade is to go back and forth with goods, and a farmer, weaver, cobbler, etc., is to produce the goods, neither have the time to wait for the other. And now you have a wage earner to sit at market and be the medium between the two and anyone else. Now, I know what you're thinking. This is incredibly simple. Of course, all this is required for a city. First of all, I remind you, if you are to endeavor in any exercise in which the purpose is to discover something, nothing can be left to misunderstanding. And given what I said earlier, there's already room for disagreement. Secondly, think of any supply chain that you may believe to be simple, such as the farmer's goods to your table, or perhaps even you sending a piece of mail, and look into what actually is required for that system to run. I think you may be surprised. With all this having been done, Adeimantus and Socrates suppose they have finished their city, and examine what the lives of the people in the city might look like so they might find the justice therein. The next few paragraphs I'm going to quote directly because that is really the best way to get the point across. Perhaps what you say is fine, I said. It really must be considered, and we mustn't back away. First, let's consider what manner of life men so provided for will lead. Won't they make bread, wine, clothing, and shoes? And when they have built houses, They will work in the summer, for the most part naked and without shoes, and in the winter adequately clothed and shod. For food they will prepare barley, meal, and wheat flour. They will cook it and knead it, setting out noble loaves of barley and wheat on some reeds or clean leaves. They will stretch out on rushes strewn with yaw and myrtle, and feast themselves and their children. Afterwards they will drink wine, and crowned with wreaths sing of the gods. So will have sweet intercourse with one another, and not produce children beyond their means, keeping an eye out against poverty or war. And Glaucon interrupted, saying, You seem to make these men have their feast without relishes. What you say is true, I said. I forgot that they'll have relishes, too. It is plain, they'll have salt, olives, cheese, and they will boil onions and greens, just as one gets them in the country. And to be sure, we'll set desserts before them, figs, pulse, and beans, and they'll roast myrtle berries and acorns before the fire and drink in measure along with it. And so they will live out their lives in peace, with health, as is likely, and at last, dying as old men, they'll hand down other similar lives to their offspring. Recall, what was Adeimantus' speech about? Quote, So don't only show us by the argument that justice is stronger than injustice, but show what each in itself does to the man that has it, whether it is noticed by gods and human beings or not. That makes the one good and the other bad. While this exploration with the city is being undertaken between Glaucon, Socrates, and Adeimantus, what we have covered so far has only been between Socrates and Adeimantus. And because of this, to quote Alan Bloom, it reflects the tastes of Adeimantus. It has an easy place. There is no scarcity, and justice takes care of itself. Each contributes according to his ability and receives according to his needs. In such a city, there's an immediate identity between selfish interest and the common good. Such a place is impossible, and that will be shown to be the case by one single sentence. Quote, If you were providing for a city of sows, Socrates, on what else would you fatten them than this? End quote. By the simple fact of one other man wanting more than just the bare necessities of life, and not just that, but only wanting anything different, throws the whole city out of order, as it is dependent on everyone's interests aligning publicly and privately. To accommodate the lavish desires of men like Glaucon, a luxurious and feverish city, one where there is justice and injustice, must devour the true city, one of only justice. Socrates knows this new city must be many times larger to house all one's material desires. Quote, Then the city must be made bigger again. This healthy one isn't adequate anymore, but must already be gorged with a bulky mass of things which are not in cities because of necessity. All the hunters and imitators, many concerned with figures and colors, many with music and poets and their helpers, rhapsods, actors, curl dancers, contractors, and craftsmen of all sorts of equipment, for feminine adornment as well as other things. And so we'll need more servants too. Or doesn't it seem there will be need of teachers, witnesses, governesses, beauticians, barbers, and further, relish makers and cooks? And what's more, we're in addition going to need swineherds. This animal was in our city earlier. There was no need. But in this one, there will be need of it in addition. And there'll also be need of very many other fatted beasts, if someone will eat them, won't there? Now, we have all these people doing all these trades. They need space for more food, more houses, more stalls, more everything. Where are they going to get all the space and land they need? From their neighbors. And if their neighbors are of like mind, they'll seek to do the same. Thus, they reason the trade of the guardian, professional soldiers chosen by their nature and aptitude, same as everyone else. Remember I said I had a disagreement earlier with the guardians? Socrates, Glaucon, and Adeimantus see the guardians as a result of excess desire, living outside the necessities. To be frank, that's ridiculous. It is because there are necessities at all that guardians are also necessary. Simple question. Is there food everywhere? Is it possible to grow food anywhere? What about the crops needed for weaving, material for building? If you are lacking a necessity and see others that have it, what do? Either one of three things. If you think you're stronger, you take it. If you think you're weaker, you run away. If you're not sure, you might try a diplomatic solution. People band together because no one is complete in themselves and need help in ways they fall short. Sure, as I said earlier, one man can meet all the necessities of food, housing, clothes, and shoes. Would be a lot easier if one man didn't have to do all that, but everyone falls short in strength. Even in a one-on-one battle, it is easy to lose everything. The odds look a lot better or worse depending which way those numbers go. Because strength is never perfectly equal, and resources are never evenly distributed. Organized defense is a first-order necessity, not a late consequence of soft living. You may be thinking that Socrates and the rest are still right because they are starting from a place of perfect justice and going from there. Except it's nothing more than an assertion. There is no singular place that meets those basic necessities continually or indefinitely. And the idea that everyone's desires are always aligned is absurd on its face. If a husband and wife, two people have more need to be in agreement than anyone else, find themselves at odds, how much more unlikely is it for a whole city? Trying to find justice or anything this way is like building a house on sand. It cannot hold. It is a fantastical assertion from which they will build everything else from. You cannot know what true justice or know any truth based on a falsity. You must start from what is known. What we know is reality tells a different story. There is no place where everything is plentiful, where each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. Everyone's needs are different, and therefore our desires are different. Because our strengths are different, we organize for defense with those whose desires align with ours against those whose desires are against. Reality does not correspond to the true city. Whatever accords with reality is true, because reality is true. Whether one accepts Socrates' sequence or the priority of defense I have argued for, the exercise remains the same. Only by examining the city carefully can we hope to see justice written in larger letters and then return to the smaller letters of the individual. Thank you for joining me for this month's Civilization Education. See you next time.